Okay, now is our last video. We want to complete our analysis by analyzing what's going to happen when the manufacturer offers a return contract. Suppose the manufacturer offers a return contract. Again, there are two options: to induce or not to induce the retailer to do forecasting. Suppose the manufacturer has decided one of the two options. Then, in any equilibrium, the retailer will still accept a contract. Then we can describe the retailer's expected profit in this way. Again, S is the retailer's type or signal. C is the contract selected by the retailer. And once this has been selected, the retailer is going to face, again, the random demand based on his signal. And this is the expected sales revenue, plus the expected return credits earned from the manufacturer. Okay, this is the leftover. If the leftover is positive, we earn some return credits. And finally, there is a payment from the manufacturer, as from the retailer to the manufacturer. Okay, this is the retailer's profit function. So, if the manufacturer wants to induce no forecasting, there will be no information asymmetry. I should say there will be no hidden information. And then we should offer a single contract, Q1, BN, TN, because a single contract is sufficient. Now, suppose we want to offer a return contract to induce no forecasting. What return contract will be optimal? Surprisingly, we only need to offer a full insurance or a full return contract. What's that? QBT should be set to be Q, P, and P times Q. I'm going to sell you Q units, and I'm going to allow you to return at the retail price P. Based on that, now I'm going to charge you P times Q in advance. So if you are a retailer, what do you think about this contract? You have full insurance because your return credit is just P. So it has nothing different for you to sell a unit or to return a unit. Also, you know at this moment when you get Q units, you pay PQ dollars. So it seems that the wholesale price is just P. Okay? So you pay P dollars for each unit to get the product. And then no matter you sell it or to return it, you still get P units and P dollars. So this is just a full return contract, and you feel it's just like doing all the efforts for free to the manufacturer. Okay? So if this is really a return contract, a full return contract, the retailer will be willing to accept it and earn nothing. Okay? For this return contract, the retailer earns nothing. Okay, actually you have observed it 2 weeks ago. And then if the manufacturer can extract all the surplus from the retailer, the manufacturer needs to simply offer the efficient quantity QI. And then the optimal return contract would be: first, find the system efficient quantity QNI, and then set the return credit to be P, and then the total payment should be P times QNI. With this particular contract, the retailer obviously has no incentive to forecast, because the retailer now can earn nothing. And then the retailer, if the retailer does forecasting, the retailer simply earns less. Because no matter what's happening, no matter what's the demand realization, the retailer will simply earn zero from its operations. Then if the retailer pays K dollars for forecasting, the retailer simply earns less. So that's why if we offer a full return contract, the first good thing is that the retailer has no incentive to forecast. And the second thing is the manufacturer can earn everything he wants to earn. if the manufacturer wants to induce forecasting, then the problem would become more complicated. Now, the manufacturer needs to offer two contracts to optimize this problem. Here, the constraints are very similar to the case with rebate contracts under forecasting. Okay, so we have IC constraints for adverse selection, IR constraints for adverse selection, IC constraints for moral hazard, and IR constraint for moral hazard. Once we have these constraints, we know with probability lambda, we will see a high type retailer. He's going to choose TH, QH, and BH. This will be my expected profit. With probability 1 minus lambda, I will see a low type retailer, and this is my expected profit. I want to solve the problem here. Interestingly, now the optimal return contract to induce forecasting is here. Okay? For the low type guy, we simply offer it a full return contract. Okay? But for the high type guy, we will offer it a no return contract. A no return contract. Let's try to tell you why this is the case. If you are the retailer and if you see a low demand signal, then you become pessimistic, right? You expect the demand to be very small. So that's why you would prefer to have an insurance. You would prefer to have a high return credit. On the other hand, if you are a high type, you see a good demand signal, then it's not very valuable for you to have a return credit. So you would be willing to accept a contract with no return credit in exchange for example, a reduced payment or a larger quantity. Okay? So basically, if we want to induce truth telling, we give each agent what they want. Pessimistic guys prefer high return credit. That's why we have this. Optimistic guys does not need a return credit. So that's why we have this. Okay? So the manufacturer will offer a no return or full return contracts to the optimistic or pessimistic retailer. Here, another interesting that we can see is we have efficiency at bottom instead of efficiency at top. Okay? And also we can see that in this case, the retailer, the low type retailer is going to earn no rent, but the high type retailer is going to earn some rent. So that's why we say the high type guy is still the one at bottom, and the low type one is the one at the bottom. Okay, so why do we have efficiency at bottom here? The first thing is that this is not violating the fact that we should always have efficiency at top when we are talking about pure adverse selection problems. If we have a pure adverse selection problem, then we always have efficiency at top. Now, this will definitely be true. But because here we have an adverse selection plus moral hazard problem, so we will not have any guarantee on efficiency at the top. Okay? So we see efficiency at the bottom. This is not impossible. Then we still need to understand why, in this case, it is better to distort the high contract instead of distorting the low contract. So let's try to understand this. What we want to do here is that we need to prevent the retailer from doing forecasting and also selecting the high contract. Don't forget that we offer two contracts to the retailer, a high contract and a low contract. High contracts here, low contracts here. The retailer has the option of not to do forecasting and then select either contract, right? If we simply have efficiency at top, then this thing is going to be the system optimal offer. We can show easily that the retailer does not need to do forecasting, and the retailer can simply choose the offer here, and then the retailer can earn a positive amount. Then that's not good, because then the retailer will do not forecast. The retailer will not forecast. And also in this case, if we want to either distort the low contract or to distort the high contract, upward distorting QH would be effective to discouraging forecasting. Why? Because a high quantity here is putting more risk on the retailer. If you want to order more, you need to be quite confident. You need to be quite optimistic so that it is a good idea for you to choose a very, very high quantity. So the best thing to do is to increase the high quantity, okay? To increase the high quantity so that if the retailer wants to select the high contract, he must forecast and get a high signal. Otherwise, he will not be confident about doing that. We can see that originally is QHI. This is the system optimal or the efficient high contract quantity. But we are doing a maximization, selecting the maximum between this number and another number. So QH star will simply become the same or larger than the efficient level. So that's an upward distortion. Okay, so at the low contract side, it's a full return. The retailer earns nothing. At the high contract side, it's an upward distortion on the retailer's quantity. So we can still show that the retailer will earn nothing when the manufacturer wants to induce forecasting. Also, this result would somewhat be very surprising. The retailer is induced to do forecasting, so the retailer gets private information. But here, that private information is not going to help the retailer earn information rent. Okay? Why? The retailer may earn rent only if the retailer can mimic another type when Xu is actually of this type. So previously we know the retailer is beneficial if Xu observes a high demand signal. Okay? If the retailer is a high type retailer, Xu has the power, Xu has the option to pretend to be the low type. And that's basically why the retailer can earn a positive information rent, because that piece of information is advantageous. But interesting thing is that in this case, the retailer will earn nothing under the full return contract. The full return contract has been offered to the low type consumer, right? Has been offered to the low type consumer. And that full return contract is so powerful. It has nothing to do with the demand realization. It has nothing to do with the demand distribution. Whatever you think about the demand, as long as you select the full return contract, you earn nothing in expectation. Okay? So the retailer, the high type retailer, will really has no incentive to pretend, to lie, and say that she is of low type. Then the retailer really has no information advantage. The low type guy has no incentive to lie and say he is of a high type. The high type guy also has no incentive to lie and say she is of a low type. So the retailer will have no informational advantage at all. And that's why the manufacturer will be able to earn everything. Then we now can try to ask whether the return contract can coordinate the system. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. We can still show you that there is a unique threshold that the manufacturer would prefer to induce forecasting when K is smaller than this particular threshold. The interesting thing is that that threshold will always be identical to the threshold for the integrated system. Okay? So if we are doing an optimal return contract, then the two thresholds will always be identical. The two thresholds will always be identical. And then the manufacturer's expected profit will be just the integrated system expected profit. That also shows that the return contract is just optimal. The manufacturer cannot find anything that is better than that optimal return contract, because the manufacturer has successfully coordinated the system and take everything away from the retailer. So the manufacturer is really at the best outcome. Let's try to understand this intuition. How come under a rebate contract the system can be efficient? The key is that this full return contract is so powerful. Okay? With the full return contract, the manufacturer, the principal, can actually take away all the informational advantage of the agent. Okay? So the manufacturer only need to offer a full return contract to a type N or type L retailer. And this particular action is going to make the high type guy lose all the informational advantage. And with that, all the manufacturer needs to worry about is to induce forecasting or not. So that means screening is no longer a problem. You don't need to worry about those guys will lie according to their hidden information. Okay, adverse selection is not a problem anymore. Inducing information acquisition is. Okay, the moral hazard problem is the only thing that remains. You need to make sure that if the system should induce forecasting, then the manufacturer also wants that. What's interesting is that the retailer's threat of forecasting would be credible only if K is small. You are a retailer. If your cost is so high, then it's not credible for you to threatening that you want to do forecasting. Okay? So the retailer's threat of forecasting is credible only if K is small. But when K is small, the manufacturer also prefers the retailer to forecast. Right? So the threat would be strong. The threat would be strong only when the manufacturer does not care about it. Basically, this is just saying that the manufacturer and the retailer somehow is thinking about the same thing. The manufacturer prefers to induce forecasting when K is small, because it's easier to do that. And then the retailer is also preferring to do that when K is small. So as long as there is no adverse selection, there is also no moral hazard, because the return contract can eliminate this screening problem. So the remaining moral hazard problem is not a big deal and can be fully eliminated by the manufacturer's return contract. Okay? The key difference between rebates and return is that screening is a problem when we use the rebate contract. When the manufacturer uses the rebate contract, we still have that screening problem, we still have adverse selection, and that's why that moral hazard problem is also still there. Okay, so this is probably the first time that we use our knowledge about information asymmetry to study a somewhat complicated problem rigorously. Okay, so I hope you will try to think about all the intuitions and implications before you come to the class. Let me do a conclusion. A supply chain in which the retailer may do forecasting or not is studied. Okay? And we consider two types of contracts, rebates or returns. We show that for the manufacturer, return is optimal. And we really go into the details to understand why return contracts are optimal. It's because the full return contract can eliminate the screening problem. The return contract can take away the informational advantage possessed by the retailer. And it's because that the return contract is more effective to deal with information asymmetry. That's why it is optimal. It is better. Okay? So that's the end of today's lecture. Returns, rebates, supply chain contracting, channel coordination, two-type model, screening, private information, hidden action. Please try to think about all of them so that you may fully understand everything covered up to this week. Thank you.